Hey, it's Kelly here. Do you know why you get up each day and go to work? Are you clear about your why? Have you got a purpose, a North Star of sorts? You know, I've been lucky enough to have a purpose for most of my career in public service broadcasting at the ABC. I really do believe in accountable reporting that helps our democracy and the accurate information we provide during disasters like fires or cyclones, and even the companionship provided by radio stations across the country day in, day out. Having a purpose can also help you when work is really tough. When things are challenging, it's useful to go right back to exactly why you're doing a project or trying a new approach. Simon Griffiths is all about purpose. His toilet paper company, Who Gives a Crap, came from the idea that he could use profits as a way to solve sanitation problems in third world countries. So he set out to have a totally different measure of success with his business.
I don't know why, but as a kid, I remember, people being like, what do you want to do when you get older? And I was like, I want to be a businessman. But yeah, being a business person in the 80s, the business people that were in the paper were the Christopher Skases of the world and the, the Bonds of the world, who were in the paper for all the wrong reasons. And there wasn't actually that many people out there who were, ending up in the paper for doing good things in business. And that's all changed now. Startups have been a huge kind of shift in the way that business people get represented in the press, and they're now made out like heroes, with and also villains still, but often like heroes as well as villains, when it used to be mostly villains. And so that's all shifted since I was at university. Even coming out of university in the mid 2000s, startups, that wasn't a term that really got used. And so, yeah, that's something that I think has been really positive. The idea that businesses can be seen as, or starting a business can be seen as a really positive pathway, but also can have a really positive impact on the world. And that's something that is super exciting to see change.
The idea of a life of meaning and purpose might have come early for Simon, but it wasn't until a few years later, when he travelled abroad, that he started to really focus in on how exactly he could have a purposeful business that could lead to real change.
I went to South Africa, worked with a nonprofit that was working on an education-based project. Immediately, was like, this is amazing. Love the outcome of the work here, but realized pretty quickly that, the way that we were going about solving the problem wasn't hugely scalable, would never be able to impact more than a few thousand people. And education is a problem that affects, almost 1 billion people when you look at adult literacy, for example. So would never be able to put a serious dent in the problem. And on top of that, realized that, the work I was doing, it didn't make sense for my skills and what I was really interested in. And so I started thinking about, how do I use my skills to solve these sorts of problems and achieve these sorts of outcomes in a way that is scalable, and realized that I could apply my skills to build businesses in Australia and in other parts of the developed world, but use the profits from those businesses to funnel back into creating social outcomes.
How crucial was that to sort of the eventual concept that became Who Gives a Crap? Like, was it really that time thinking there's a philanthropic sort of small scale way to do it, or we can do it in a different way where we are really driving profits and that makes it more scalable and we can tip that back in? Like, did that penny drop in South Africa?
Yeah, the penny dropped. It's a little bit different to that though. The penny dropped in that, philanthropy does a good job. The philanthropy market, it's efficient in many ways. The challenge though is to get, to solve these massive problems that we have, you need way more capital flowing into the solutions than what we have available in the philanthropy market. But what I realized is that the philanthropy market is great. Let's leave it where it is, and instead tap into the trillions of dollars that change hands in the economy from the exchange of goods and services. And if we can skim just a little bit out of those, trillions of dollars, then we've got a new market, a new way of funneling funds into some of these solutions that is much, much more scalable. And so that's what I wanted to try and bring to life. I guess it's the idea that, you make money. That's where the profit part comes in. But the reason that you're doing it is, it's bigger than just profits. It's about the purpose that comes from operating the company. So in our instance, we donate half of our profits to help build toilets and provide access to clean water. So that's the purpose part. But we can't do that if we're not profitable. So profit is the means to get to our purpose for us. But every company's going to be a little bit different in the way that they approach that.
For TV reporter turned entrepreneur Meggie Palmer, purpose came out of a curveball moment in her career. She found out that male reporters around her were all being paid more to do the exact same job. And when she asked questions of her boss, she was met with a simple, well, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. And so that's exactly what Meggie did. She moved to the other side of the world, to the Big Apple, to start Pep Talk Her, an app and a movement aimed at closing the gender pay gap.
Basically, I found out that my pain conditions were quite different to that of my colleagues, to the point where I was being paid and treated quite differently to people at the same level doing the same job as me. And I found out kind of by accident. And, I was kind of raised to think that the world was an equal place and that women could do anything. And I was a child of, the 80s, and that was very much like my primary school was like, yes, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do anything. It's a great world for you all. So I really believed the hype. Honestly, I drank the Kool-Aid. And so when I found out, I was like, oh, it's just a mistake. I'll better let them know because they'll fix it. And so I raised it at the company that I was working at the time. And I thought that when they realized there was an inequity, it would be like, oh my goodness, whoops, we'll fix it. Don't stress. But the response instead was, if you don't like it, you can quit or you can take us to court. And I was like, I beg your pardon? What? And they're like, yeah, basically, F you. Just pretty much yeah, well, we knew this all along and what's your problem? And I was like, well, my problem is it's not fair. And they're like, that's not our problem. That's on you. So deal with it, basically. So, it's interesting. Again, to get to where I was in my career and the age that I was at that point, to only then realize that the world was an unequal place is in and of itself a bit of a privilege, and I appreciate that there's so many people listening and so many people in the world today who experience that at childhood. And I just never had that, which is a blessing. But when I did experience inequality, because I was a woman experiencing the gender pay gap in real life, I found it quite a shock, honestly. So things like this, which was, again, it's not rocket science, but I just didn't know. And so what happened was, after that whole experience, I was then able to help so many other friends. I had a friend who was sacked while pregnant. I had lots of friends who've since been underpaid. I've had friends who 6-7 years, no pay rises, not for inflation, nothing. And so this experience taught me a lot about how I could help other people. And I started to realize again, this gender pay gap situation happened to me. Who else has it happened to? It's basically that shitty experience has kind of put me on this path to, where I am today, living in New York, running a company that, works with some of the biggest Fortune 200 companies in the world.
From Dead Set Studios, this is Curveball. It's a show about leading in challenging times, and I'm Kelly Reardon. The famous positive psychology advocate Martin Seligman says that people who have meaning in their work are always the happiest. When you know why you're doing something, when you have a purpose to your work, everything just seems to fall in place. I can remember working with Richard Feidler on the podcast Conversations, and he always used to say to me, Kelly, this is why we're so happy at work, because we know what we do, we know why we're doing it, and at the end of the day, we can look at the product and go, we're really proud of this thing we made. Former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Liz Broderick has also been crystal clear about her purpose to end discrimination against women, and now also to tackle human rights abuses in her role for the United Nations.
I'm the keeper of literally thousands of stories of human suffering and inequality that I witness every day, not just here in Australia, but across the world, in my global role with the United Nations. And you know what? It's that bearing witness to what's happening today and to have hope I think is just so important. So these are the muscles that I'm flexing every day. And, I would have learnt to flex those muscles on the journey of working in male-dominated environments and being excluded or being denied partnership or whatever. And then, I'm getting back on the horse, and absolutely I'm using the emotion that I have from other people's courage and the stories that I'm bearing witness to and holding. I use that as my fuel to really implement a strong systemic response. I didn't see myself as a radical activist. I absolutely believe in the power of radical activism, and there's a role for that. But my role is more to work within the corridors of power in an evidence-based way, but to help people shift and change and to really build gender equality there, but through maybe a more measured and considered approach.
How do you straddle those small changes versus the big, pieces of legislation that need to happen?
The small changes are what makes you powerful in advocating for the big changes, really. That's the fuel that enables me to be a strong advocate, because when I stand up to advocate for change, such as the paid parental leave scheme, it's not just Liz Broderick speaking. It's Liz Broderick fueled by the thousands of instances of women who have not been able to spend time with their newborns because of a financial imperative. So it makes you really powerful, I think, when you speak like that. And no one can challenge the stories. Because you were there, you didn't just see a piece of data on a page, you sat and felt the full emotion of that story, and you can't unsee, unfeel, unhear those stories. So I think those individual instances are really important in stepping up and leading change at either the national or the global level.
And how early did Liz Broderick know she wanted to fight for equality? Well, really early on, actually. She discovered her purpose in utero.
I think I wanted a role where I was engaging with people. I always had a strong sense about fairness and equity, and maybe that was because I was born an identical twin. So, right from the get-go, if my twin sister got a present that was better than mine, I knew the world was not fair and we needed to do something about it.
Share a womb before you were even here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she was a lot bigger than me, so I probably got the slim pickings in the womb. So maybe I was set to kind of redress that inequality.
To listen to more leaders like Elizabeth Broderick, Meggie Palmer and Simon Griffiths, just follow Curveball in your favourite podcast app so you're alerted whenever we put out a new episode. And please do leave us a review. We really love it when you tell others how much you're enjoying Curveball. We also have a bit of a community built around our podcast via our LinkedIn newsletter. So if you follow me, Kelly Reardon, on LinkedIn and go to the featured section, you can subscribe to the Curveball newsletter. This episode was produced by Liam Reardon at Dead Set Studios. Curveball's executive producers are Rachel Fountain and me.